just to let everyone know, we'll be recording this session. And with that, we'll start now. Hand over to Pravina.
Thank you, Dory. Namaste and a warm welcome to everyone. Firstly, we'd like to start by thanking all the attendees and our esteemed expert panel and our moderator for carving out time from their busy schedules for this event. In this brief time through this event, we'll explore the issues of equity within the context of urban early education, and with that, shed some light into the foundation and direction of Kathmandu's education system. Going briefly over the agenda for this event, we'll first begin with the introductions and then move on to the speaker insights. Then we'll have a panel discussion about shaping early education, and we'll have a Q&A session where the audience will be able to pose questions to our speakers. This marks the end of the event itself, but we also have a very exciting post-event event lined up, which is speed networking. So do stay back to that as well. And a few housekeeping rules. Tori has mentioned this already, but attendees are requested to please use the chat box to post any questions to speakers or even to Utopia. The panelists will be answering the question at the end of the panel session, and we will try to take in as many questions as the time would allow. If there are any technical questions, please forward them to Dory. This event is being recorded. We are also live on Facebook, and the recording of this event will also be available on Utopia's YouTube channel. We also request all the attendees to please set their Zoom view settings on speaker view. If you are using your laptops, it's on the top right corner. And if you are on your mobile phone, please swipe left. Thank you. Now beginning a brief introduction about Utopia. The urban center of the world is radically shifting. Out of the 100 biggest megacities by end of the century, 90 will be in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and only 10 in North America and Europe. The very same cities are straining under the weight of the rapid growth, and some of same cities who don't yet have dedicated urban innovation ecosystem and platform. Utopia is on a mission to build urban innovation ecosystem for megacities. We are doing this by building a network of city lab platforms in some of the fastest growing cities across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. As urban venture studios, City Labs works with urban entrepreneurs and partners to rapidly envision, validate, and launch new urban solutions and startups. The City Labs become the home for urban innovation in their city. The City Labs are part venture builder and part urban fund. As urban venture studios, City Labs help build and back up startups focused on making their cities better for the many and not just for few. We also help government innovate for their cities. We currently have teams in Kathmandu, Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, and our mothership is in San Francisco. And we aim to establish many more city labs in the network in the years to come. We launched our very own city lab here in Kathmandu early this year to be the home for entrepreneurs, futurists, and creatives shaping the future of the city. Here are some of the examples we draw inspiration from around the world. And we are very urban focused and sector agnostic, hence the varied inspiration. And all of the work that we do, we ask one simple question for everything that we do. Will this make the city better for the many, not just a few? And beginning with a very short introduction for early education. In alignment with our role as company builder, Utopia builds in-house ventures with the focus towards impact that makes the city better for many and not just for the few. Early Education X, or EduX as we lovingly call it, is an in-house venture that aims to even out the playing field of access to education for the urban poor by providing inclusive, quality early child education and care in the city. Briefly touching upon the journey of EduX so far, it can be divided into 4 phases, starting with the very first user research phase, and the phase we are now is in phase 4, where we are refining and looking into creating an MVP. So for the first very initial phase, or the phase 0 of this venture, initially Utopia conducted user research across different informal settlements within Kathmandu. And for the informal settlements that we focus for this particular venture, for the beginning of this particular venture, which is in Sangkumul, 3 main issues surfaced through our user research, which were affordable, safe drinking water, safe play space or daycare for children, and also training opportunities for the youth. Given an existing space for the play space and also a formal daycare center which was run in the community, we collectively decided to move ahead with early education. And moving on with brief insights for each of the phase. For phase 2, we ran a live prototyping within the community for 2 weeks. The major insights from this prototype are, we found that the daycare framework had to be adapted and tailored to suit students of different ages and stages of development. This flexible approach helped the students to better adapt to their new daycare environment. The next insight was that in case of parents who were more engaged and more willing to spend few extra minutes with their children and also with the teachers within the framework of daycare, especially during the very resistant drop-off periods, their children had a higher attendance rate. And it seems that a parent-focused framework is necessary for dealing with students of dependent age groups. The community was involved throughout the phases through which both the parties benefited in multiple aspects. One example for that would be for our live prototyping phase, we were able to hire 2 experienced caregivers within the community, which helped us in gaining trust and build more trust within the community and from the parents whose children were going out into the daycare. The benefit from their side was also the employment opportunity and the experience opportunity that they received. Hence, community involvement is very important from the get-go for any community-centered venture. The other insight for this would be that the daycare space also inadvertently became an informal space, especially for mothers. We saw members within the community make new acquaintances in the space and bond over their child's eating habits and birthday celebrations. The space served a larger purpose than it was intended for. So we as a service provider need to be more sensitive and attuned towards these functions. As we are moving into, as we are in phase, creating a better prototype that is affordable for all those who can't afford, and also desirable for those who can. It would also be, we're also looking towards creating a venture that is self-sustaining with multiple revenue streams. It would also bridge the gaps between early to formal education, providing support to the parents and the children throughout the process of transitioning. And it also works with an adaptable and empathetic parents' engagement framework that recognizes their limitations, supports, and empowers the parents to take an active role in their child's development and ensures continued learning outside of school. And for all of our in-house ventures, Utopia does seek a co-founder to build the venture together with. And also for Early Education X, Utopia is seeking a co-founder to co-build the venture alongside our team and partners. So if you are interested, do reach out to us if you are passionate about impact in education and want to make a lasting positive change in the lives of many children and their communities. The link to the co-founder profile is available in the chat box and would also be up on our social media channels. Now beginning the panel discussion, let me introduce our moderator, Aditi Adhikari. Aditi is an education policy researcher and consultant. She has experiences of working closely with non-government agencies and donor organizations in the education space. Aditi also holds a master's in education policy from the Harvard University Graduate School of Education. So now giving the floor to Aditi.
Thank you, Pravina, and hi, everybody. So I'm going to moderate today's discussion, and as Pravina mentioned, we're going to focus on equity in education within urban spaces, and especially on early childhood education. I'm going to start by introducing our speakers. Mika Mathema is the Vice President and Education Leader at the Daya Foundation. She's also Director of Education and Scholarships at Zonta Kathmandu. She is an education consultant for project-based learning at Sanskriti School in Kathmandu. Our second speaker, Niranjan Kumar, is he freelances as a consultant in Kathmandu and works in arts and education. He has experience teaching in the New York City school system. And in the future, he hopes to be more involved in gender and sexuality sensitization programs in schools. Our third speaker is Sunita Khadka Chauhan. She's the program director, counselor, and trainer at Orchid Garden Nepal, and she works with underprivileged children and their families. Orchid Garden Nepal was established in 2004 and has been active since then. So I'm going to start the discussion by, I think, asking a question for you guys to frame our discussion around. And it's a very broad question. How would you guys frame equity in the context of education, especially when we're looking at an urban center like Kathmandu? And I think in your answers, maybe talk a little bit about equity and equality and maybe other things that you feel are important. I think Niranjan ji, do you want to start? Cool.
Okay, hello. Hello, everyone. So to answer the question of equity in education in Nepal, I'd like to take a slightly broader stance and say that like going back to Nepal's history, society, politics, uh, Nepal was sort of founded in a very unequal way, right? So the there's a lot of inequality in Nepal's history and the way the country was founded. And this inequality has direct implications in the education system as well. It's reflected in the curriculum and the way the system was imagined. So for example, especially in the Panchayat era, like from 1960 to 1990, the entire curriculum and everything was designed to sort of benefit one group of people and exclude the others, especially marginalized people, indigenous people, their cultures, history, language. So that's why, so this response might seem a little counterintuitive, especially in today's context of early education and urban innovation, because whenever you hear of urban innovation, one tends to think of design or spaces, maybe a new curricula, which is all important, but then the larger issues get left behind. And even when you think of early education, people might question, oh, why is this? Why? How does history, society, politics connect with early education? But I think some of that depends on the values that the organization holds too, right? So for Utopia too, when you say urban innovation, like what are the values that you're going to base your innovation on, right? Like, are you going to really take all these issues into consideration or not? Um, so that's sort of the general gist, or the background. And the first poll question that came up was also asking how equitable is Kathmandu's education, the accessibility. And my response was it's actually extremely unequal. Um, there's a massive difference between people who can afford private school versus those who go to the public school. And I'm bringing up history politics because there also doesn't seem to be enough intention from the government to bridge the gap. It's mostly done in a tokenistic way, and that's why it's a big problem. Like I don't have there are no easy answers. But it's a question for everyone to ask. Like so, while designing early education, like how in what areas do we want it to make it equitable? Like, are you going to look at the gender and caste of students, or the backgrounds or geographical backgrounds, or is it going to be based on other factors? One key element that actually makes a huge difference, especially with early education and primary education, is language. And as I was saying, especially in the Panchayat era, Nepali was promoted as the national language. Um, Whereas now we know that Nepal actually is a very multilingual country. Lots of different languages are spoken, like whether it's in Nepal's Tarai belt or the mountains, or even the indigenous Newari people. There are lots of different languages, but the national curricula only promotes Nepali. And on top of that, the issue is complicated with globalization and capitalism with English education, and that's done in a very haphazard way. And I think this has direct implication for early childhood education, where language is key. It helps kids think, it gives it gives social access. So you can imagine if kids whose mother tongue is different, who enter early childhood education when they are 3 or 4 year old, and the primary language practiced in the professional setting is not related to their mother tongue, then immediately that's a major problem. So the question is, and this is actually even in the national platform, like there are lots of language activists lobbying with the government, like to design curriculum or textbooks in mother tongue. And it's a huge language, but it's something, I mean, it's a huge problem, but it's something definitely to think about. So these are just some of the issues. And of course, what I haven't mentioned a lot is, because of the history of oppression um, and marginalization, a lot of indigenous cultural knowledge that was already present in Nepal for decades, that's also been lost. And that's also has direct implication for early childhood education and primary education. So cultural practices, items, rituals that's practiced in homes does not connect to what happens inside classrooms in schools. So how do we bring that in as materials for preschoolers or early childhood education? So um, I'll just wrap up now by saying there's a lot of problems. The education system is unequal. There isn't much knowledge around. Even the attention given to primary and early childhood education is actually very new in Nepal's context. It's only 15, 20 years old. Like before that, there's not even much appreciation or understanding that to value early childhood and primary education. So we have a long way to go, but I think these forums are important to exchange knowledge and think of next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, in either order, Nika, did you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Aditi ji, and I want to thank Utopia and EduX for inviting me, and I'm so glad that we have like-minded people who really want to focus on early education and bring about a change. Thank you. So Niranjan's, Niranjan ji's was very appropriate in the sense that we are missing lack due to the different government sectors or emphasizing only Nepali. We have lost a lot of the different indigenous and ethnic group languages. You know, I'm a Newar and I still don't know how to speak Newari very well. And that doesn't say much about me, but that was the system at that time, that we were only taught in Nepali. So we lost that chance. So I think right now the government has responded to this very much after federalism came, and they are introducing different schools with Nepal Bhasa. Like for one instance, like I know like Nepal Adarsha and Darbar High School, they have Bhanumabi, which is focusing on Nepal Bhasa. At the same time, Sanskrit is a language, Devanagari, all the languages, you know, just come from Sanskrit. They also focus on Sanskrit languages. So in the sense, it is getting better in that language respect for the children. But let's go back to, again, our early childhood development. And I, work with their foundation in the urban areas, Basantapur area. Really, it's the city, I would say the slum areas, gullies, all of that. And we work with 6 schools. And 6 schools, so I will be talking about, from my experience, the early childhood education that I have seen there. Now, what happened was, let's go back a little bit. 10 years back, the government suddenly realized early education is very important. International pressure was also there, like UNICEF, Save the Children, World Bank also funded a lot. So they said, oh, we have to have the ECD in the schools. What they didn't realize was like the government of officers didn't realize the value of early childhood education at all. They were like, they just knew that they had to have early childhood in each school, and whether the schools had the room, the space, the infrastructure, it was introduced. Then they thought it was like for starting from 3-year-olds till 5-year-olds. But unfortunately, in the urban areas, we have a lot of migrant population coming from the villages. And sometimes from the villages, when they come from the villages, the student is not used to a structured school, So what happens, a traditional school background, they may have been working in the field, they may be like savvy in the worldwide ways, but actually no academic background. So they were also put in ECD, not realizing that they are older. So in ECD, if you go and look in these schools, you have a wide range of children from 3-year-old to 8-year-old, sometimes 10-year-olds too. So what happens is the school was that the classrooms are too small for those ECD, they don't have any playrooms, they don't have any toys, they don't have any educational materials, anything. One of my friends, Bina Didi, I highly respect. She's Kita Kitty Bari in near Bhatpatini area. So, and when I visited her school, I was so envious because she has this beautiful Montessori school with playgrounds and natural things and growing plants and everything. And that's how it should be in the urban areas with the government schools too. But we are lacking that. And why are we lacking that is because the officials, not just principals, teachers, waras, municipalities, haven't realized the value of preschool. What is preschool? I mean, the recent report done by World Bank and UNICEF, they really know. I mean, they did a good study, and I would recommend everyone to look at that article also. So what they're trying to say is, you know, this is really important investment in early childhood. And I'm so glad EduX is also focusing on this. Investment is a lot because once you give this early childhood, I mean, coming from marginalized children, coming from different indigenous children, coming from different backgrounds, and we do like a melting pot. We can teach them Newari, we can teach them Maithili, we can teach them different languages, and just talk about Nepal in a context like a beautiful country with different ethnic groups, different languages, which is still missing, right? So now coming back to, again, all the different problems in the early childhood is a lot. I think the most important that we need to focus on is the teachers themselves. Yes, the teachers are only paid 6,000 rupees. I mean, that is really, really low. Even my household staff don't, you know, get paid much more than that, right? So what is missing is we are missing these trained teachers. We need really trained, qualified teachers in ECD for this development structure to take place in the child. We need to understand the psychological aspect of the children, emotional and cognitive levels. It's all a mixture of this. But if we do invest in ECD, these children will have a head start, you know, a big head start, and they will be ready for traditional schools. But unfortunately, what we are doing is haphazard way, no space, no materials, nothing, only in namesake. We have this ECD in the urban areas, the schools that I work with. So where does the foundation come? We came in to supplement nutrition to these children. So most of these children, because the parents go to work early morning, they're not fed properly. And because of lack of education, the nutrition is, they may give a bag of chips, which is very prevalent and relevant. It's all over the shops and everything. But like in the olden days, we used to have really good, wholesome rotis, you know, and that is missing these days in the new generation. We've also, Nepal, unfortunately, adapted to fast food, and parents being so busy, both mom and dad going to work, the children are missing that. So their foundation funded for wholesome, you know, midday meals in these schools. And we saw a lot of children coming just for the nutrition. So we're talking about cognitive, we're talking about physical, social, emotional, plus nutritional whole. It's a holistic education like EduX I saw in the slide that you were talking about. I think like now, where do we start then? Where do we start is we really have to start again from the ministry level, from the Nagar Palika, from the Wara, because now it's federalism. I'm hopeful that Nagar Palika, because they have a smaller area to focus, that they will be focused on the schools that they're working with. They will look at the salary, the training of the teachers. They will look at the space of the school. They will provide materials. But unfortunately, again, the budget was not including all of these in the recent budget of 2077 Nepali Bikram Sambat. You know, I went to talk to the officials and they said, ma'am, you know, the 6,000 is still 6,000. We were trying to increase it to 13,000, but it did not take place. That doesn't mean, but the Nagar Palika does have some money, so they may just, you know, provide a little bit more money, and the Wada may be giving. This is such a volatile situation. How can you retain the teachers then? If we don't have this good salary system and we don't respect the ECD teachers, it's not a play group only. It starts with, if you look at compared to private schools, they have a play group, they have nursery, they have lower KG, they have upper KG, and then the children are ready to go to first grade. They can grasp everything and they are so ahead of the game, which I'm so sad, and I'm really unfortunately that we are missing that in the urban areas. So there are lots of other different problems as far as the standard and benchmark goes for the preschool, because the preschool should be a place where they do by learning, right? They learn by doing, and that is missing. So the curriculum is like rote memorization, even in this early age, like 3, 4, 5-year-olds. They're learning the ABCD by rote memorization. They're learning the numbers by rote memorization. They're given so much a big task homework to do. So, and we have to also remember the parents. Who are their parents, right? So their parents are all mostly marginalized society. They didn't get this head start in education. They come from villages, so they're not literate like the private parents. Thank you so much. Thank you again. I told them to tell me, you know, to stop because I have so much to share, but thank you. We will again meet when they ask me, you have questions, then I can answer the questions.
Yeah, I'll get back to you with those. But for now, I think let's move on to Sunita ji. And we've talked a lot about what the problems are, maybe what's being done to address them, or what you think might be done to address them.
May I start? Okay. Namaste, everybody. Me, Sunita. I'm pleased to see you here, and I would like to welcome everyone. Yes, I'd like to start right from very beginnings. The things what we do will be forget, but the things what we impact remember forever. Next. Dory, next. Yeah. I would like to start from mental health. The program organizers give me the parts of mental health because mental health is one of the biggest issues from the beginning, and it was not addressed before. But now we are much more aware on mental health and taking precautions and preparing for themselves as accordingly. So here are more talking about mental health is without mental health, there is no health. The WHO has introduced this slogan. And we already have stress, anxiety, and fear, like a gloomy, this all already exist inside our body. But when it starts affecting our daily activities, when it affects our professional life, personal life, in our attitude, then it's start calling the issue of mental health. Otherwise, if the level of maintainables or level of all this is okay, then it's not need to be worried about this social phenomenal natural things. And why we are suffering mental health is basically biological factors like genes or brain chemistry, life experiences like trauma, abuses, family history, mental health. If some family members already suffered from mental health, then we also may probably not 100%, but maybe that is also one of the cause to be suffer from mental health. And other one is mental health is a curable disease, not need to be worried. If you go on time and consult with the health professionals, then it will be curable disease. Next. Next, please. Okay, how do we solve the mental health problem, especially in our workplace or in the family or in the friend circles? We have to build the supportive cultures in the workplace and supportive cultures in the workplace, continuous professional developments. Like sometimes we have to conduct the workshops, seminars, some energizer sessions. These kinds of things also can maintain the mental health. People can feeling monotonous, coming and going and doing same tasks every day, and that is also makes all kind of pressure, all kinds of anxiety. So if we do some kinds of activities timingly in the appropriate gaps, then it will also help to maintain our mental health and make it energize and refresh us. And workload also, sometimes we have working with kids, it's really very challenging. We have to work them with not only teaching them, but we have to work them from different tasks, from child to siblings, siblings to community, community to family. So many people are connected with children, and we are working with all of them. If the issues come, then this is also a kind of workload, and we have to submission the homework on time and respond to email and internet and home assignments and checking all those things teachers has to do, and it is also a kind of burden sometimes and makes feel bored and stress. That is also a case. And CBT and MBCT. This is cognitive behavior therapy. It's all about related with the cognition. Well, it doesn't mean that what we think, what comes, emotions comes inside us, that is sometimes out of our control. Sometimes negative emotions come, sometimes positive emotions come, sometimes mixed types of emotions come. Emotions cannot, we cannot control our emotions. And if it goes and start affecting our, again, same professional life, personal life, and our workplace, at the family, then we have to take the medication, and that's properly called the CBT. And MBCT is mindful-based cognitive therapy. This is quite new than CBT. And here we go through meditation, yoga, pranayam, and yoga, pranayam, dhyan. These three things has to be controlled. The comes under the MBCT. And what is the benefits of doing all this means, when something already we know the brain chemistry, or when our neurosis could not function well, and where the information could not flow in the mind properly, then the mental disturbances come there inside. It is also a kind of engine. And there are a lot of wires, and if one wire has loose, broken, or damaged, then engine could not run the vehicles. Like the same way, our mind also do the thing. So what we do under the MBCT, then it started produces the hormones that started thinking us positively. When our negative thoughts come, it start to change into positives gradually. It needs time, but we have to wait it. And small things can make a change. Sometimes small things, like if someone is coming and hello, how are you? Then it also matters. Wow, he or she is addressing me, and she is like caring me. She is asking me, how are you? And sometimes just showing in the smiley face also a lot of energy, like she give me a smile. It's a kind of positivity comes. So it's a small thing. It's not a pay, but it works a lot sometimes. So we have to be very, very careful on those things. Next, please. Like fewer than 11% of children with intellectual disabilities are fully included in regular education classroom. Smith and Brownie has do the research on that, and rest of others even could not try. The slides is going to come back here. Many of these students simply have not been given chance. Yeah, we have seen, if we gone through the different datas and the news, then there is a very pathetic condition of the children. A lot of disabled children are still kept inside the home and not meeting with the peoples, not and even not aware of how to help them, how to promote their self-esteem, and how to help cope up with them to be differently able peoples. Like, so still there is a big gap in between of normal children and the disabled children. Thank you. Next. Next, please. Yeah, the way we unique is our fingerprints. Of course, every child has unique talents, every child has unique potential, and every child has um, uniquely born. So there is always, we have to be respect each and every child's, and we have to be respect their all the feelings and all the uniqueness of the child. All child are equal. Like, yeah. Please, next. In the same way, when the fingerprints are different, the brain also different. Every child have different brains. Some are quickly catch up, some takes time, some have need a special attention, and some can feel like nervous in front of the peoples. It's all about the how the brain was developed during the childhood. So it's all about the like same brain structure of the brain also can play the vital role to develop the child's how he become like. Next slide. Next slide, please. Here, yeah, this is the age of toy, curiosity, prefer to be with same age group, enjoy caricature, growing mentally and physically, learns skills, social skill, socialization. And here, children learn all those things from the open environment, not inside a classroom. So we have to give them as much as possible open environment for them. And what they feel and how they realize, and they all kinds of developmental factors depend on the natural environment. So on child to be on the lap of nature. So yeah, in this age, if we miss to socialize children, then later in past years they will be suffering from mental health. This is a highly possible things. Please, next one.
Sunita ji, can we
Yes,
come
please.
back to this in a few minutes when I start with the question answers?
Sure.
Right. So I would actually like to catch on a point that Sunita ji was talking about diversity of learners and how all children learn differently. And I'm going to ask a question about this, but to Niranjan ji, because he has experience as a teacher, you know. So especially
Yeah.
as somebody who's worked as a teacher, how do you think we might develop an education system where where we foster to the needs of different types of learners, and especially I think in terms of early education, but also in general?
So a couple of things. I also picked on what Sunita ji was saying about how, we all have really different learning styles. Our brains are different. And Mikha ji was also mentioning the need for socio-emotional strands in the curriculum for students. And these things are, again, historically missing from our education system, right? It wasn't valued. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's again important to relate to Nepal's historical and socio-political makeup, because again, if in the Panchayat era only one idea of Nepaliness was promoted, there's only one way to be good, one way to study, one way to learn, one way to be Nepali, then I think our society still doesn't value diversity as much, because we know that even in our families, just if we do something slightly different, that's viewed as not good. We are expected to conform in our society for various reasons, whether it's for women, it applies to anyone. And again, that mentality has trickled into the education system, where for the longest time there was only, who are considered our measures for, accomplishment, or who is considered to be quote unquote smart students. There was only one idea of how to do that. So basically, like, whether it's rote learning, or whether it's text only, reading, writing, or whether it's only those who can speak loudly, those were given value, right? And it's sort of designed based on that. But now we know that people learn in many different ways, people express in many different ways, and that's why it's important to include that in the curriculum, and especially at a very young age. So because students learn differently, some people might learn by reading letters, but some kids need to actually touch things. In fact, this is important to everyone. In early childhood education, it's important to expose students to all kinds of possibilities, right? So that's why the arts also come in, where it's important for their fine motor skills to be able to use paint brushes, do color. Movement is important, to run around, or even in terms of, there can be really interesting curricular designs where, especially for Utopia's context, where even very small kids can learn about design by building with blocks or architecture. Those kind of things were also missing. Again, in our system, only reading, writing, and rote learning was valued. So the need to include different kinds of materials in the curriculum, and even to design curriculum in a way that's appropriate for students and that connects to their lives. So for example, in early childhood and primary education, as much as possible, the curriculum should be connected to their identity, their immediate surroundings. So let's say if we open a lab in Kathmandu, then hopefully the curriculum will be about the urban centers in Kathmandu, that they learn about that, as opposed to learning about the British, for example, which is completely unconnected to the lives of our students, right? Which has sort of been the norm in this globalized, capitalized world. So curriculum plays a big role. The space plays a big role. How are students, how do they move in and out? Mikhaji had mentioned nutrition, and you could actually make an entire curriculum around food, for example. Like, I've seen it, like really young students learning. You can learn math by looking at a recipe of how to a bake a cake, for example, or even how to cook a vegetable curry. You could potentially include that as part of early childhood or primary education, where students learn to measure a little bit of ingredients, and there's math, there's proportion, there's ratio, there's also doing, motor, learning by doing. You could make a diagram about that, art. So there's so much possibility for innovative curriculum and to be creative in order to address different needs of students, because students are different. But if on the level of policy, if those who actually write the curriculum, if they don't have this kind of understanding, if the thinking is still what it was 50 years ago, only focusing on reading and writing, then it's difficult to make these things happen on the ground level. So that's why all these ideas are super important, and even mental health in general and socio-emotional skills. The focus on the well-being, overall well-being of students, and not just on quote-unquote academic accomplishment. So how do you envision early childhood education? That students need to be excited about coming to school. They need to enjoy whatever they experience, and what a 4-year-old enjoys is very different from what a 50-year-old thinks that a 4-year-old should enjoy. There is a big difference in that too. So that kind of understanding comes with experience. It comes with a genuine interest in how kids learn. It comes with some psychology. It comes with, you can get informed by findings from all kinds of disciplines. So I'll just wrap up again by saying that if we value diversity and equality, then we need to really get down and put it on practice and not just have it on paper in a way, you know. It's nice that there's federalism in Nepal. It's the need of the hour, but how much is it actually practiced? How much of the population really believes in it is another matter in a way. So I'm gonna stop there. Thank you.
Okay. So one thing that I actually wanted to, I don't know, chime in with is I used to work in a school as a teacher trainer, like, supporting the teachers, let's say. We had a very enthusiastic ECD teacher, and but she didn't have any training. She hadn't gotten the government training. So the second time that I went there, I took a bunch of books for her. Like they were big books, like very appropriate for her students who were mostly between 3 to 5 years of age. And she really enjoyed them. And then, because before that, she had these like big charts, charts, and then OIE charts. So she used to make her students write. So I was like, Miss, like, they're not gonna learn this. They're gonna get bored. I mean, some of them can barely hold pencils. So let's teach them this way. And she was very excited. And so we kind of, like, the week that I was, in the school, we did like nap times and play times and whatever. But then eventually she stopped using the books. So when I was there a few times, like a few months later, I asked her, what went wrong? And she said that the principal of the school, he taught first grade Nepali. He also taught first grade Nepali. It was a primary school. And he told her that, when you send kids to my class, they should be able to write. Like, what are you doing with them? Because if you're going to read these storybooks to them, they're not going to be able to write when they're in first grade. So he made her stop. Like, well, I mean, he didn't make her stop, but all that pressure led to her stopping. So my next question, I would like to kind of link to this experience. And so I think I've noticed, and maybe I'm a little too optimistic, but I think I've noticed that early childhood is changing a little bit, or ECD is changing slowly, as schools are equipped with carpet corners, or I don't know, blocks, or some learning materials, and some new teachers. I think teachers are mostly young. So I think that's slowly changing, but the transition from ECD to school to first grade, I think that's just like really different. And so how does that affect children and their learning? Mikaji, I think maybe you'll be able to respond to that.
Thank you so much, Aditi ji. So there is a big gap. ECD, they're playing at least, they're still, so the pressure, like you said, is so true that the teachers themselves, they will say, no, ma'am, when they go to first grade, they need to learn all of these things. That's why I'm just focusing on Kaka Gaga, ABCD, whatever way, rote memorization. So that when the ECD that we are talking about, again, two different scenarios, right? One is in the public school, the government school sector, and one is in the private school sector. So when we are talking about the urban areas, mostly the urban areas, they are beautiful private school ECD, and they transition very easily because they go from step by step from play school to kindergarten to upper grade. So it's a very slow process where they learn with songs and nursery rhymes and playing and Montessori system. They learn the values, they go and get their own, whatever they're interested in that day. So there's a lot of Montessori schools also in the urban areas. Now, I come from a background with the public schools. With the public schools, there is a big gap because that structure with the teachers, that rote memorization is so strong. So but what happens is the kindergarten is missing. Remember, due to lack of funding, lack of space, the kindergarten, they've said, oh, the government has told us to have ECD. Now we have ECD. 1 year of ECD is free for all the children, like we are talking about all the children in Nepal, but who will want to go to a government school where there is no proper infrastructure in that classroom, right? Then the big gap is the child who is in 3 years old, 4 years old, when they go to first grade, because they are not able to read in Nepali. And this is Nepal, right? In Nepali context, Nepal, like Niranjan also said, we should include their mother tongue. But even with mother tongue, we also now the realistic thing is boarding schools. Parents always look forward to boarding schools because they like their children to speak in English. So even English is introduced at an early age. So can you imagine a child coming from a home, let's say they speak Maithili, and then they're introduced to Nepali, and then they're introduced to English. So by the time they do go to traditional first grade, they cannot read anything, they cannot do anything. So the teachers in first grade are having a difficult time because the government says they're able to do all these things and they have to make them really learn fast. So a lot of students, like this remedial teaching that will help in the future, which I think is very important in these cases.
Thank you. And I think that's also true because schools that are more accessible to certain populations or more accessible to everybody, those are schools where we see more traditional pedagogies being practiced, right? Like, these schools that you pay a lot of money to go to, they're actually trying new things maybe, but schools that are actually accessible to the masses, they're still teaching in a very traditional way. So let's again divert a little bit and talk about, I think, the situation that we're currently in, which is, we're under lockdown. We're going through a lot of stress, I think, in terms of, and that was actually one of the poll questions also that came up. Parents, teachers, students are all going through a lot of stress in terms of their health and what's going to happen to their families, economies, right? Like what happens because there's no work or because there's limited work. Earlier, Sunita ji talked about the importance of socialization for little kids, for early childhood age children. So in times like this specifically, and I think Sunita ji also has experience with children and teachers during the earthquake, and which is similar to what's going on right now, maybe in a sense. So in times like these, what role does mental health play in children's development, in little children's development? And what are you seeing when you work with children and parents right now?
Thank you. Basically, during the pandemic time or the crisis time, most of the children are unaware what to do or where to go or where to talk, whom to talk. Like, so they are in the confusion state because their parents are suffering from kinds of things like food and snacks, shelter, and they have the fear of again suffering from the same kinds of incidents. And parents are concerned on different matters, and children are suffering from different mental uh, health issues. And there is a big gap in between of parents and children. Sometimes it's knowingly create the gap, sometimes unknowingly create the gap, because parents has to be more concerned on how to taking care of the children, how to manage the morning to evening meal, how to manage the shelter, and how to taking care of the whole family as a guardian, as a responsible person. But at the same time, children taking attention towards the parents. My parents are not taking care of me. My parents is not near to me, not talking to me, not asking me how am I feeling. These kinds of things are happening during the crisis and during the pandemic. And in this pandemic also, I have met a lot of children, and they also have the same issues. Now, some parents obviously taking care of their children proper way, like engaging in the kitchen work, washing, cleaning, playing in, watering in the garden, planting, playing with kids sometimes. So they are managing their times in a different and very productive way. But at the same time, we have some parents who are really not caring about the children's, when they are going, to whom they are meeting, and whom they are playing. And there are a high risk of transmitting diseases, and children become face in the violence as well. So there are both kinds of parents we meet. And children's ultimately children will be the victims of all sorts of carelessness, or better to say, not aware of the children's day-to-day activities, and some creative works that has to be done together with children. So parents has to be play the different role during these situations, and parents has to be more active and proactive, not active, proactive, for taking care of the children. And yeah, this is how I found. And if we're talking about the earthquake in Sindhupalchok, I met the teachers of government schools, and we have the self-care session with them. And they are feeling very panic during that time, because Sindhupalchok massively destroyed there. And they are not in the position of being with children, in touch with children, and giving the support to the children. They themselves having a mental health problem. They have the fear, anxiety, and some teachers have very high level of stress also there. We found there. In these kinds of case, first we have to be able to taking care of ourselves, then we can provide the care to others. So as an adult, as a parents, as a teachers, first we have to be taking care of ourselves, taking some initiative to taking care of ourselves, maintain ourselves first, then we will be in the position of providing the support to the others. So after all, it's all about how we cope with the situation, how we take the resilience of the situation, this all. So this is all about the differences of the individuals, how the situation affect to the person. It's all about individual differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita ji. So we're going to do one more question, and then we can move on to, I think, audience questions. We have some really good questions for the audience, from the audience.
Okay.
But I think before we move on to another question, I would like to encourage people in the audience to send in more questions through our chat box. So during this time, I think because we're at a very specific moment of time right now, where everything as it is has kind of changed or paused, however we want to look at it, you know. How would we, or what support do you think educators and children need at this time to be able to take learning forward when schools open back up? And how can we provide that support? That's, I think, the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how in the long run will this situation affect education, or early education, or equity in education in the long run? You know, especially I think with changes to families' situations, and even to schools. I think schools have been particularly hard hit, right? So how might that affect education and or equity in education in the long run? Anybody can start.
Okay. So I really like the EduX. You know, if you are really wanting to make a difference in the city in Kathmandu, the preschool is, you know, if we have a separate preschool, it's not connected to the school, and we have this beautiful space, and we can all adjust the equipments and everything. Not only that, remember the mothers of these children are, most of them are illiterate, or they've had some formal education but not much. So side by side, I feel the adult literacy is so important when we have preschool children and when we have mothers who are not very literate. They're not able to understand what is really happening. That's why they have this mindset, oh, my child needs to learn ABCD. You know, that's such a important thing for them. But as we introduce the adult literacy and train them and show them the ways of about preschool and what ECD really means and how their children are learning and grasping and able to relate to all the 4 C's that we talk about in the 21st century, like the children are collaborating when they're playing, you know, they're communicating with their friends, which is so essential, important, and reading habit. Reading habit, you know, if you go to developed countries, the mother reads to the child as soon as, you know, the child is born. The most precious time is bedtime, because then the mother and the child, you know, they share a book, they share the values, they share the stories. And of course, that is really big missing gap. So I feel that the equity, when we go back to equity, we are focusing on the marginalized children, because when we are talking about equality, equality for education is everywhere. The rich can afford everything. But equity means like really looking at this population where they need the most support. So I feel that, you know, having this beautiful space separate from the school areas where they have no space, and having really good trained Montessori teachers, or, you know, other ways of teaching systems, that would be like a dream come true in the urban areas. That would be my wish too, that I would like to see a school where the children of the marginalized society is thriving like the private school children, like Keta Kiti Bari children from Bina Didi's school, where they have all the facilities, and Montessori trained teachers where they can adjust to not just the 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-olds. They can all be in the same classroom, but the little ones can learn from the older ones, you know, and the older ones will be monitored by the teacher in their more like cognitive learning. So that would be an ideal situation, I feel, and separate from the schools, separate from everything. And if we can convince the Vadas, you know, and the Nagar Palika to have such a thing, we will see a big improvement in overall education, even in the traditional schools where first grade, because these children will be so ready for traditional school. Thank you.
So to answer the question, how can we best support teachers and students during this moment in time, or in the near future? I think some of this depends on how hopeful we want to be, and how much of a leap in imagination do we want to take. Because one thing I've been thinking throughout this time, and some of it is happening organically, is that, for example, I think if we think in a completely different or a creative way, I'm talking about even like dismantling existing structures, and some of it, like I don't know how possible it is or feasible, but what I'm thinking of is this idea about homeschooling, for example, right? So even this whole idea about formal school, and it may sound completely unimaginable because the entire society is structured around that, but we know from that there's a lot of other countries that actually have legal provisions for homeschooling. A huge population of parents don't want to send their kids to school because they believe that schools actually are more harmful than, they'd rather supervise their kids properly. There's also a lot of research that comes up which says that schools actually kill creativity, because imagine young children, they actually grow up, being curious innately. They want to explore, they want to try different things, but as they go through the formal education system, they become less and less curious, less and less creative, because the way it's designed is like that, right? It doesn't encourage all these other great abilities. So I'm actually questioning the usefulness of schools as an institution. And what if we can imagine completely different scenarios where instead of a huge school, there's like different community centers, or what Mikha Diji was sort of saying, if we can separate preschools entirely from the formal education system and have a completely different space, different materials, different ways, that could be one idea, right? So, and we know that in this time, parents and students, they're all really stressed about the uncertainty and the lack. But I've also heard from a few groups of parents and students who have actually said that, wow, we never had this time in our life to bond with our students and, in family, to really appreciate the time instead of being anxious about uncertainty, and really, find new creative activities to interact with each other or to play games. And desperate times call for desperate measures. So I know, so, during the earthquake and during the pandemic now too, people are talking more about mental health, which didn't used to happen in Nepal's context as commonly. So I feel like earthquakes sort of raised these issues about the need for mental health. And now maybe the pandemic, globally and locally too, people are talking more about the need for social emotional support. So maybe that will be more of a part of schooling in general in the near future. So I think we should take these trends and try to be innovative about it. But I know that this doesn't really answer the question of, like, tackling the mainstream school-going population and lots of teachers and students who actually really need immediate short-term solutions. And I don't have straightforward answers to that, because the nature of this problem is extremely complicated and complex. I mean, we can look at examples from other countries who are trying it out. Like, we know in Denmark, they started preschool 2-3 months ago, like with different shifts and etc. But again, whenever we want to really address a complex problem, it does require creative solutions and to think outside the box. And I'm not sure how possible that is. And I'm sure people are talking and discussing. But the way is to, I think in different ways and not try the same tested solutions.
Okay. Sunita ji, I think it's the same question kind of, but this is actually, I'm going to link this to a question from the audience, which is kind of what I was thinking when Mikha ji was talking about the time that a mother, the time that parents spend with their children and how important that is. So this is a question from Bal Mahat, who says, parental involvement is very important for the early development of a child. How can we support parents of small children who don't have the resources or who are socially excluded, who can't be reading to their children, for example? And how do we support those parents? Okay?
Okay, thank you. Actually, parents has very important role, especially in the early childhood. Both parents have equal role to foster the child properly. The child learn the boldness, the adventurous, the challenge, and the courage. These all those things child receive from father, and the emotions, love, care, the soft part, they learn from mothers. So here I would like to give equal emphasis for the taking care of the child in the early childhood. And both have equal role. If one has missed the role, then child could not grow properly. And how we support to the parents, the one who are not able to support to the children's. First, we have to make them aware what is the parents, how do we manage the time in terms of busy schedule, and what are the benefits of giving time to the child, quality time to the child, and actually who is child, what is child for them. If parents really understand, then child are the first and the best property. There is no other valuable things rather than child. If they understand this way, then they will manage the time. And the first thing is we have the emotional attachment. How the child was born. Is it the child was born, it is my interest, it is my compulsion, it is my by force, or how I give a birth to the child. That is also matters sometimes. And in the context of Nepal, we have seen a lot of families who don't have proper planning of having child. This is also a kind of issue. Not child taken care of properly, age appropriately, or age their milestones of the age. Why parents don't know the child's whether see properly or not in the age of 2 years, 3 years, and a lot of parents still not caring about the milestone as going on my child. Or both equally, parents has to be more sincere on how my child is going on, what age has to be taking care of what way. So I must say to the all parents, first plan whether you need a child or not. What will you do next when you have child? What will be the priority for your child? And what kinds of parents would you like to be? Like authentic parents, authoritarian parents, careless parents, or the democratic parents? What kinds of parents would you like to? What kinds of parenting would you choose to give to your child? That is the most important things. If we democratic to our children, then obviously we have the feelings of taking care of. And instead of busy schedule, I already said, we manage the time for them. Okay, how do we manage the time? After lunch, it is very good time to gather with the family members and sit for 20 to 30 minutes, and nobody use gadgets, just sit all together and how is your day to day. Parents share their own levels, children also start sharing. And when the children are starting sharing their parents, a lot of issues will be definitely solved. Where there is a sharing, definitely the solutions will come. So after lunchtime, every parent has to be with child for 20 to 30 minutes as a quality time. Just talking, sharing, and knowing each other more. And it gives some informative talk some information, sharing informations, or talking about characters of the book, or talking about the incident that recently happened, and discuss about the incident, how it is happened, why it is happened, and who will the guilt, and who is the responsible incident. If this kinds of using as a critical thinking, the children all start to thinking critically, and at the same time they will learn the problem solving skills also from there. And always we have to make a time for having lunch and dinner together. This is also very good time for being with children. If we have lunch and dinner together, then we will have to see each other, to know each other, how the child is eating, and what are the best part of the child. And while working in the kitchen, call the children together. And small, if you talk about the small kids, just give a basket of potato. The children will drop on the floor, keep in the basket, drop in the floor, keep in the basket. That is also very good. Children will learn counting, children will learn passion, children will learn coping strategy. So, and when we are in the garden, take the children there and to show them how the plant grow and what is the relation between the reciprocal relation between the plants and human beings. And if you talking about the nutrition food, bring the child together and show them that beans should be kept in the water. And next day show them how the beans will become wet. And next day again show them how the beans will be keeping germinated. And make the soup. Okay, this is the way we can make a soup. And that will be the very nutritious soup for us. And that is very important for your body. So this different way, it is not mean, doesn't feel my parents are making me engage or my parents are teaching something and I am learning something. Not, they are not realizing those things. They will be entertained, and parents also have time to be spending quality time with the kids.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you.
When you talked about milestones, I think the rest of the things you said were relatively, and it is to spend time with your children. It's easy, but you need to know something. So when you were talking about milestones, I was thinking about it. I have a little baby, and I'm like, I don't know, sometimes he wants to sit for like hours, and he's like 6 months old. So I get on the internet and I look up, how like 6-month babies, and the internet gives me a lot of knowledge. So I've been thinking recently about how parents who don't have access to the internet do it, like how do you know if your child is behind on something and if you need to help your child learn? Like, so there's a lot of things that I think also have to do with access and language and marginalization and being able to read and not being able to read. But we're going to pivot to another question from the audience. And this one I think is for Niranjanji, because you talked about learning styles. This one is from Arogya Koirala. And he's talking about, so he says that, how do you feel about, and he shared an article in the chat session, I think you can access it. But basically, some people are saying that learning styles should be thought of as a toolkit. So instead of having one learning style, all these different learning styles should be accessible to you or should be tools for your learning. How do you feel about that?
So I haven't read the article, but no, I mean, the basic thesis sounds quite right. I mean, yes, that's why in the early grades, it's important to expose students to different kinds of learning, different materials, so that later they can choose one that sort of fits them, right? So we don't force them like, this is your style or this is how you learn. Like if they have a toolkit of different approaches, some kind of problem solving requires texts and letters, some requires visuals, some requires you to do things and move, some requires you to talk. So early grades is a time for them to be exposed to all those possibilities and have some kind of access so that later they can use it as they see fit. I actually also wanted to respond to Arogya's other question about community, and that connects to what you just said, Aditi, about using the internet to learn things, and it connected to something else too. But basically, I think, yes, during the pandemic, this is also a time to really learn from the community and from people who are around you. You don't necessarily need to go to just a school and be taught by a teacher to learn something. And we're always learning from our world, right? And curriculum has unlimited possibilities, like in terms of how you want to design. So actually, that's why this is a time to okay, this is our world, this is what's happening now. How can we use the resources to learn different things? It's really up to the people who are involved. If we want to do it in a slightly formal or a large scale way, it requires manpower. So people who are committed to education, teachers, etc., and that again requires training, literacy, etc. But then when you're talking about, like access to internet, etc., I mean, we can think of that in a couple of different ways. We know that even quote unquote illiterate parents or parents in the villages, they already have different kinds of knowledge, right? So it's again about what kind of knowledge do we value. Like if we think of like formal schooling education, then we're talking in a capitalist way where certain skills are valued. But then when we go to Nepal's villages, I mean, they have been raising kids. There's all kinds of knowledge. The moms know what to do. They learn from their elders, right? So I think we don't just need the internet. I mean, the internet is a very new thing in the history. Of course, it's very valuable, but then the business of raising kids have been going on for centuries, and it's just acknowledging that. Um, so I think, yeah, the indigenous knowledge and learning from the community and creating curriculum based on that and sort of using that to tackle problems is sort of what's needed. And I think that's where different learning styles also come in, it's about what we want to teach and why that matters a lot. Thank you.
You. So like my parents also always tell me, like relax, you're not the only one who's had a child. Like we've done this. No, I don't seem to be able to. But no, I know where you're coming from, and I know as an educator, like, but I think what I was also trying to say, although we have to move on to another question, is that, because we're all isolating from each other right now, maybe it is a little bit difficult also to use the community as a curriculum, because we're all in our little houses, or we're supposed to all be in our little houses. I was in Elam for the first part of the lockdown, or for and there a lot of kids were at each other's houses and learning and beading and stuff. But it seems a little bit more difficult right now. So I think ready to move on. We're also doing it on time. To final remarks, and we're gonna keep these very, very short. Maybe a minute. And maybe you can watch your chat. I'll let you know when time is up. But closing remarks, and we're gonna start with Mikaji because she hasn't spoken in a while.
My closing remark is, this is such a good platform that Utopia has, organized, and I really want to thank all of you all. So the closing remark is, children are not, they don't have a choice. They are so dependent on us. And we as citizens and community, we need to take our responsibilities to these children, to these marginalized society children. And we need to have that responsibility, that connection, not just my family, but they are also my family. We are all one family in Nepal, and everyone needs to put that effort and see that ECD will definitely be the stepping stone for the future for whole of Nepal. It's for the parents, the moms who need to get that extra income so that they can have a safe place to leave their children, to learn and have fun, and would like to go to school the next day. Then for the dads also, for the fathers, they need to take an interest also in their child's education. They're providing. So all this is all responsibility. Like, I remember John F. Kennedy saying, ask not what the country can do for you, but ask what you can do. And I would challenge everyone today, whose audience or everyone, to say that ECD is important and for the future of Nepal, and to see Nepal economically grow, not just have disparity between the rich and the poor, but fill that bridge, that gap, that we all need to take that responsibility. We all need to put in the money. If the government is not doing something, that we all can support nutrition. We all can buy books and supply books to these public schools, to the children. Their foundation is doing one of these things. We know that it is really difficult time for the children. So we have collaborated with a bookstore, and we are just giving the books for the children to just read, to enjoy, and to learn from nonfiction books. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sunita ji, would you like to go next?
Okay. I have.
Sunita ji.
Please, I have a little bit problem. Yeah. What I would like to say is I always love love languages from Dr. Gary Champion. And those love languages are what happened to me? Yeah, children are always in the vulnerable situations. They need protection, care, support to foster, because they couldn't taking care of themselves. So adults has to be always taking care of the children in a very appropriate way, and they are very sensitive. And we have to be understand and internalize the sensitive children. So we always support them, foster them, encourage them, and always we have to be more care on how my child will be, learning, how my child is feeling, and how can I make the best atmosphere for my child, and what are the things can be good for my child. So everyone should think regarding of child issues, child violence, child rights, and the necessity of the child. If we think on positively that way, and if we foster the child, like it is not necessary what we done for children, but it is most necessary that what we teach our children, that is the most important things. So we have to be more care on their all holistic development approach, and we have to be feeling more concern on regarding of their overall developmental issues, necessities, queries, and after all, they are the backbone of our nations in the future. Thank you.
Niranjan ji.
Wait. I want to follow up on what Mikhaji was saying about what can we as a country or society do, right? And this also relates to, again, my opening remark about Nepal's history politics. I think we have to remember that when a country is transitioning from a very feudal, extractive structure to federalism, it doesn't happen easily. So the whole mindset of public education and public institutions and public good hasn't been there historically in Nepali society. That's why we still have extremely poor infrastructure, public infrastructure, public schools, there's no public library. And this connects directly to, if we I don't know how long it takes or what it takes to build public institutions. And that's why the most marginalized sections of the population go to public schools which don't have good services. So that shift needs to happen, and it applies to early childhood education too. And the other thing sort of related is it's happened gradually over time, but it's really time to take early childhood education very seriously. I mean, that understanding wasn't there historically, but now it's seeped into our culture and society. But we need to do more, like ranging from how do we treat students to the fact that they have personalities, they have their own different needs, they are diverse, right? It needs to be handled sensitively. So all of those factors sort of needs to enter the mainstream discourse, and especially those stakeholders in education, and design materials accordingly. I think if there is a will, then we can surely find the way. But the big question is whether there is a genuine will. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Niranjanji, and thank you, everybody. I think we've had a good variety, or like we come from a good variety of backgrounds, and we have a different perspectives, different important perspectives when we're talking about equity and marginalization and early childhood within the space of within a very unequal space. Let's say, I think Kathmandu itself is so unequal that, just having like schools, yes, are a pillar of equity and social justice, but just focusing on schools in a very, very unequal space is probably not enough, / will take a very long time. I think this was a very interesting discussion, and I hope our audience also felt that way. But for now, thank you so much, and I'm going to give the floor back to Utopia, and I think they have something interesting coming up again.
Hello, thank you, Aditi. And a big thank you to all our panelists and our attendees for staying us throughout the event, and also for sharing their thoughts with us. The insights and all the complementary data from today will be integral for us in building our EduX venture and taking it forward. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind our audience about Utopia's search for a co-founder. So if you're interested in co-building this venture with us, with Utopia, if you're interested in making a change, if you're interested in creating an impact, do reach out to us.